Good morning to everyone in West Africa, and good afternoon to everyone in East Africa, and good morning from Canada, where it is still dark outside and 7 o'clock in the morning, Atlantic time. Such a pleasure and honor to participate in this first module live session for module number 1 for the CSPFM e-course. I will be facilitating the sessions with an array of amazing guest speakers and facilitators over the next 6 weeks. So it is an absolute delight and pleasure to have you all here today. And I understand we're also recording this session so that those of you or your friends who have missed it will be able to join as well. So today our purpose is really to start off with looking at module 1 of the e-course. As you know, module 1 of the e-course is the introductory module to the 6-week public financial management course for civil society organizations. And the purpose of the e-course is really to get you comfortable with understanding how you, as civil society organizations, are able to intervene in the budget process, to be heard, to get your voice heard in state budget process. That is the process that the executive branch, the government, uses to develop the budget and oversee the budget, but also the role that Parliament plays in the budget process in terms of holding hearings about the budget and overseeing the budget at the end of the budget cycle through audit reports. So there's a lot to do, but talking about public financial management is just a means to an end. So in other words, we're not here just to talk about public financial management. Now, for me, I love the topic, so I could just talk about public financial management all day. But the purpose is not only to talk about public financial management, it's to better understand the system in your country so that you as civil society organizations can play the most effective role possible in intervening in the budget cycle and getting your voice heard so that your priorities and your values are reflected in that process. And that's what we'll be talking about for the next 6 weeks. Just hoping that you've all been able to access the platform and that you were able to complete module number 1. If anybody is having technical issues, please let the PN Africa team know so that they can address that issue. Because obviously we would very much like to try to alleviate any problems so that you're having a smooth e-course experience on the platform. So if you're having trouble, please do let us know. The purpose of today's workshop, as I mentioned, is to talk about some of the issues that are part of module 1, but also to get you to participate and get your voice heard. So really, our purpose is not to have a one-way transfer of information. I mean, that's what the e-course is about. It's about giving you a lot of information, asking you lots of questions. The purpose really today is to have a chance to have more of a dialogue. And we have 2 really fantastic guest speakers and facilitators with us today. Rachel Giaba is a public financial management consultant who is going to talk to us today about gender responsive budgeting. And as you'll see, for those of you who have already been on the e-course platform, gender responsive budgeting is not something that is stuck in a corner for one module or for you to learn independently of the CSPFM e-course. It is very well integrated into the course platform. And the reason for this is that we believe that gender budgeting, which is really about the development of a gender lens through the budget process. So when the budget is being formulated, approved, is the state and Parliament taking into account the needs of women and marginalized population groups? And so that's something that needs to be integrated into the whole budget process. And Rachel specializes in that subject, and will talk to us a little bit about gender responsive budgeting today from her own personal experience as a public financial management consultant. After we've gone through that, on the next hour, we will we will introduce Adams Fusheni. And Adams, I hope I've just pronounced your last name properly. Please, if I have not, or Rachel for that matter, please correct me. But we'll then start a facilitated exercise related to module 1 that Adams will take over and talk to you a little bit about, or ask you a bunch of questions and get you into breakout groups so that you can have more of a dialogue with other participants from the course, from the e-course. So I'm very excited about that. And then we've also asked Adams to talk a little bit about his recent experience in Sierra Leone. Adams is Ghanaian and based in Accra, but he spent the last 3 years in Sierra Leone as part of an EU-funded parliamentary project. So I think Adams will have some fascinating observations for you related to his experience working in Sierra Leone, not only with Parliament, but also talking about how public participation can be brought into the budget cycle. So I think we have a very exciting live session for you today, and the success of the live session is going to really depend on your participation. So please get involved as much as possible. Use the chat. Be active in the breakout groups, and I think we'll have a great first module session. One last thing I do want to say before we kick off more formally, I think, is just to say that, as I mentioned earlier, the public financial management e-course is a means to an end. The means is to talk to you about public financial management and public participation in the budget process. But the end goal is to get you more involved in your own countries, or give you the tools you need to be more involved in the budget process in your own country.
Good morning.
Oh, yes, hi. I was just talking about the purpose of the e-course and the fact that one of our main objectives is to make sure that we give you the tools to be more active in the budget process in your own country. And so as we go through the e-course, we'll start to talk more about opportunities for continued discussion and dialogue about initiatives that you would like to take as civil society organizations to become more involved in the budget process. So it's great to learn about public financial management and public participation and international standards, but the real objective is to make sure that after the 6 weeks is over, for those of you who are interested and motivated to do so and have the capacity to do so, the idea is to look at how we can support your development of maybe a small project around your participation in the budget process and your CSO's participation in the budget process. And so, I just encourage you also to keep your ideas hat on in terms of just as we progress through the conversation, just think about the possibilities. What would make sense for your organization? You're going to hear lots of things over the next 6 weeks, but hopefully we can help you hone in on some ideas that will give you the power to be more involved in the budget process in your country. So more details on that a little bit later. Before I turn things over to Rachel, who is actually at the airport waiting to get on a flight, I just want to just very, very briefly review the budget, the module number 1 for you. Just to give you an idea of what was covered, and hopefully you were able to access module 1. If you had any trouble accessing module 1, it would be good if you would advise the PN Africa team. But as you see, we covered a number of topics. One of them was an overview of public financial management. What is public financial management? And really all I want to say about what is public financial management, there's a lot of technical terms that are used that may be confusing. And really what I want to emphasize is public financial management is about the processes that take place behind the scenes to develop the budget, implement the budget, and oversee the budget. It's really the work that the state does around these processes. So a lot of that we don't see. It's what civil servants are doing inside the buildings in the capital cities of most of your countries. On the budget cycle itself, and I realize this is a very grainy diagram, and I apologize for that. We'll have to get that fixed. I just want to say at this point that, again, our objective is not necessarily to get you to memorize the 4 stages of the budget process. But what I like to say as a PFM practitioner myself, who's worked in over 60 countries around the world, is that most of the attention during the budget process is spent at the approval phase. That's when the Minister of Finance stands up in the House and tables his or her budget on behalf of the government. And the media picks this up, and there's a lot of hype around the issue of budget approval because it's really an opportunity for the country to find out what is going to be contained in the budget. The problem is that generally, parliaments have very limited time to approve the state budget. Sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a month, sometimes 2 months. But the capacity of parliament at this stage is limited, and the capacity of parliament to understand the budget at the approval stage is very limited. And that's partly because not all parliaments have, for example, a parliamentary budget office that can help them to interpret and better understand the complexities of the budget. And so that also means, though, that for CSOs, if you're commenting on the budget document, the executive budget proposal, when it's been introduced in Parliament, sometimes it's almost too late. There's an excellent video coming up of James Muruguri from the Institute for Public Finance, Kenya. I believe it's in the second module, if I'm not mistaken, where he talks about the fact that by the time the budget is received in Parliament, it's almost too late to make changes. And there's a number of reasons for this that we won't get into now. But this is the reason why you'll see in our discussion that we'll be talking a lot about opportunities at the formulation phase. This is when the government is developing the budget. And this is a time where the Ministry of Finance and the line ministries are thinking about their spending for the next fiscal year. And the opportunities to have an influence on the budget will be much stronger here than they will at the approval phase, where in most of our countries, including my own, Canada, when the budget is introduced, it's really pretty much cast in stone. I'll just say a couple of words about execution and oversight. Let's go to budget oversight for a moment, which is number 4. And many of you will be familiar with this because one of the things I think we have a very strong tradition of in Africa is public accounts committees and supreme audit institutions. And this is all about looking at whether money has been spent at the end of the fiscal year, after the year is over, whether money has been spent prudently, whether when it comes to Parliament, whether the budget was spent for the purposes intended by Parliament, and whether value for money was achieved in implementing the budget. And we'll have a whole module on this. But this is really ex post oversight. And there are opportunities for civil society organizations to be involved in the ex post oversight phase as well. I'm going to wrap up in about 2 minutes because we have Rachel waiting to catch a flight, but also we have exciting guest speakers and facilitators, including Rachel and Adams, and I don't want to just make this about my voice, but I think I'll just say a few words about the budget execution phase if I can. And what I want to say about this is the least utilized opportunity for civil society and parliaments to monitor the budget. If you look at the Open Budget Survey data, you'll see that Parliament is probably the weakest at the budget execution phase. So what the budget execution phase means is, let's say your budget year starts in January and your budget has been approved in December. The entire next year, January to December of the next year, is really the budget execution phase. It's the fiscal year, the new fiscal year, when the budget is being implemented as approved by Parliament. We're going to see many opportunities here for civil society to be involved. We have a great section in module, I believe it's module 4 on budget execution that specifically looks at the role of civil society organizations in monitoring gender promises. What does that mean? It means if the budget's promises in the approved budget promises a certain amount of funding for specifically for programs that benefit women and marginalized population groups, civil society organizations can actually verify whether that money is being spent. And there's a whole body of knowledge that we will discuss about around that process. So the budget execution phase is a really interesting one, and it's a great opportunity to get more involved. So the key message here is after the budget is approved by Parliament, don't sit around waiting for the next budget to be tabled. There's lots to do throughout the budget cycle. I'm going to stop there. I hope that this brief overview has been helpful. And feel free to put some comments in the chat if you want to add anything or don't agree with anything. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who is going to talk about gender responsive budgeting.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad that we were able to make it. So as Jeff has mentioned, we are just going to have a discussion, very interactive one. It's more of sharing of experiences. It's not a lecture. I think most of the work will be done with the e-learning, where you would have to understand the basic concepts. And so what I would do is just to have a discussion to be able to understand your level, understanding of the concepts and how you've been able to practically use some of the tools and what you intend to do. So we'll just have a discussion around that. So my name is Rachel Jabba. I'm a development practitioner. I have expertise in public financial management. I've worked in the PFM for about close to about 14 years, mostly from the CSO side, from the donor partner side. And so I have a lot of experience in terms of if you are a CSO, what to do in terms of social audits and how to engage the budget processes. So I think today the main focus is to share my insights on gender responsive budgets and the role of public participation in public financial management. So to start with, do we all have an understanding of what GRB is? So I'll just want to use just a very practical example where something practical we experience at home. And so we would want to view public finance as our resources, our personal salaries or our personal resources. So let's just have an imagination of being in a kitchen or being in a family setting at home. If we want to prepare a meal, what needs to go into it? Who has the resources to provide to the family? If it's the head of the family who needs to provide that, or it's coming from two parents, it means that we need the resources to be able to do that. And so to plan for a meal or for your dinner, first you need to think of what do we want to eat. And so once you understand, you know what you want to eat, it gives you an idea of what you need to put into that. And I think that that's the critical stage of preparing any meal, is to know exactly what you want to eat. If you know that, and then you know you want to prepare basic, let's say, I'm in Ghana, so I'll talk about jollof, since we are the best, we have the best jollof. And so if you want to prepare jollof is just basically rice cooked in tomato sauce. You would want to know if it's jollof, if it's going to be with chicken, you would want to know what needs to go into it as the main ingredients. And so you are thinking of buying your chicken, buying your rice, tomato, oil, and all the basic things that you need. You need to understand the family size. If it's 5 people in a family, it gives you an idea how much of these ingredients you need. And so once you have that down, and then you're able to write it, you need to think through as in what is the cost, unit cost of each of the items, and how many are you buying. And so once you have it, you know that in the total is going to be $100. Then how do you get the $100? Though you have to go and find your $100, the funds need to be released to you to be able to now go to the market to buy your ingredients, and then come home to prepare. And so what we've discussed now is the planning stage, which is very critical, because if you don't plan and you go to the market and you even have money, what are you going to buy? So once you buy your items and you get home, that is the preparation stage where you prepare the meal. And so we want to link that to the implementation. Once you do that and then you cook the meal, is the implementation stage. And then whoever eats it is to be sure that, did you really prepare jollof? We planned on jollof. What did you cook? Was it good? And then as you eat, you're able, those who were not there whilst you're preparing would want to wonder, this is jollof, what went into it? What did you use? And so that is more of the audit. And then you come to check, you ask for $100. What did you use it for? How much did you buy the items for? Are these the items that you bought? So I think most of the time we make issues around budget, PFM look very technical, but this is just the basic things that we do. The practical things we do at home is the same thing. But now when we take this private funds that we use in our homes into the public space, we become public resources. That is what is the public PFM. So you want to find out how these resources are generated, how these resources are used. And so if you talk about expenditure and you're talking, you talk about your expenditure and your revenue, it's just about how you are spending the resources. But this time it belongs to the public. And so we all have interest in it. If it's private in your home, no one has an interest because it's your money. But the moment it becomes public resources, that is why we all have responsibilities in ensuring that these resources are used effectively, efficiently, and then you would want to follow to make sure that they addresses basic needs. And so I think this is just the basic understanding of public financial management. And so you can apply it in any setting. If we come to talk about GRB, that's a gender responsive budget, this is not a special budget. This is just it's something you need to do. It's a process. So the UN Women in Action would say that gender budgeting is not about preparing any separate budgets for women. Also, it's just about solely increasing spending of women's programs, but rather gender responsive budgeting seeks to ensure that the collection and allocation of public resources is carried out in ways that are very effective and then contribute to advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. So in other words, you would want to translate it as gender commitment into budget commitment. And so what are you taking into consideration? And so if we come back to the home setting, if you have a family of 5, the intersections you want to think of, do I have kids in it? Would they be able to take in more chili? Are they able to take in all of that? If we have women and we have a lactating mother, or if we have a pregnant woman, what ingredients do we need to avoid, or what do we need in that? If the person is experiencing heartburns, it means that if the cook loves so much pepper, you may have to be considerate, or you would probably want to put in more. And then once you prepare your base sauce for your jollof, you would want to separate the meals and then prepare one without it or one with. So it means that consciously you've taken into consideration the people who are going to have that meal. And it's the same ideology we bring into when we are talking about GRB, is to say that you are putting together a plan, you are putting together a budget, but what are the different needs of the people this is going to serve? And so the moment you take that into consideration and you go in to spend or plan or put together any project, it means you took a conscious effort to understand the various needs. And so all your planning will be specific to all of this. And so we'll say to understand that, I would just want to use a text. It says that ensures that our budgeting process considers the different needs of men, of women, other marginalized groups. And so other marginalized groups will be persons with disability. Even within the women groups, you would want to find people in terms of even unemployment from someone in the category as being marginalized. And so you want to consider all of that. People's sexuality can make them marginalized. And so this is the intersectionality between just the genders to understand what are the different needs and what needs to be put in place to be able to address these needs. So alongside, when you talk about public participation, it brings in diverse perspective. So which is very essential in GRB. when communities are involved, that is the public participation, the government can make more informed decisions that reflect their needs. And so not just sitting and then thinking to yourself, what are the various things? But once there is public participation, I'm not talking about those in quotes consultative meeting at a very high level. This is ensuring that the people speak for themselves. So we usually say the PWD have this slogan says nothing about us without us. And so you have to make sure that the communities are involved in the process. And by this, it reflects their real needs. It addresses issues of transparency and being accountable to the people that you are serving. So to understand GRB, I think in what the approaches in doing that, so allows us to address inequalities by looking at how these budgets are addressing the different needs, groups, or gaps that you will need to look at. So it doesn't mean you have a separate budget. So when we are talking about GRB, we are not asking government to have a separate budget. We are saying that with the same budget you have and the same project that you have there, did you take into consideration the different needs of the people that you are going to serve? So that is more of a question. And I think that most of the time, when it comes to the social sector, it is where it's very critical for GRB. And so health budget, you're talking about education, you want to make sure that these are addressing specific needs. Are the projects gender sensitive? Are they being able to address the needs of both men, women, girls, boys, youth, and also the different marginalized groups within specific communities? Another, and so some of the tools that are relevant, I'll talk about experience on what I've used. There are so many tools, and I think that's along let me just touch on the cycle. I think Jeff has spoken about it. And so how critical it is for us as civil society organizations, some of the things that we need to know. And so one of the critical things we would want to know is the budget calendar. The budget calendar will help us to know at what point or what is an entry point for us as civil society. So if you know the budget cycle of your country, and I think this is public knowledge, you would because of the OBS survey, these days you find it on almost every Ministry of Finance website, and you would usually find that there are publications or economic documents depending on the country. So once you have the budget calendar, you are able to tell at what point in time a specific activity is going to begin. And I think for us, the critical stage we don't want to miss is the planning stage. Because once you miss the planning stage and it gets to execution or it gets to audit, you would have missed making sure that these things are done. But it's also still not a missed opportunity. Once you also involved in audits, at least you'll be able to raise issues which now will feed into planning again. So at the planning stage, as civil society, we want to be involved where the budget calendar gives room for inputs to be made. If we have resources, are we also would we have the opportunity to engage our communities we are working in to ensure that their inputs are reflected in the budget, which will guide in terms of programs or things that will be done in the budget? Because once you plan, it goes into the budget. And for most countries, if it's not in the plan, and a lot of countries are also using the medium-term development plans, if it's not in the plan, where annually you have the annual action plan, it means that you cannot budget for it. And so it means that that is a critical stage we don't want to miss. And our role here will be, if we have resources to get citizens' input into it, or as civil society being able to engage with the various bodies that would want to share our input and ensure that there is consultation at that level, from the decentralized level or from our assembly or from our province level. We have ensured that they've considered the needs of the communities. Once that stage is done, and then the budgeting is also at the preparation stage. So budgeting will need to be done. So it moves into the budget. So if there is a plan, you will be able to allocate resources to it. But if you don't take into consideration of these activities or plans or programs at the planning stage, you're unable to budget effectively for it. So let's take an example for a project. If you want to implement a project, a health project, and then you just put it vaguely into a budget to say, provide screening services for community. What specific screening services? If you do that, you will probably not even budget well, and then you just have you allocate $1,000 to a particular program because you didn't plan, you didn't consider all the various nitty-gritties of these plans. But if you want to do a screening, it's just screening. What is the screening for? If it's cancer, you will need to understand what is prevalent in the community or the country to know that if you are talking about prostate or breast cancer, it means that you're targeting men and women. If it's the women, specifically, what is required to ensure that they are at a specific place? Are people going to move, or if it's targeting very rural communities, are we going to move to the community to do the screening? If you have all those in mind, then it means that you are thinking of means of transport that will move you there, setting up, and all of these things helps you to budget effectively and consider all of these things into it. And then at the implementation, the approval stage, this is where you are going for hearings, and then the budget is approved to say this budget has been approved. And then you have the parliament's rule, also ensuring that the approval is done. Once there is approval, it means you have the right to spend appropriation. So it means that by law, you have all these, you have your budget approved. And so whatever revenue that you thought of will be available for you to spend within the budget limits that have been provided. And then the last stage will be the audits, where we also have a role to play as social audits to be able to make two follow-ups to ensure that what was said in the budget are being done now. And so for us as civil society, there are lots of tools that can be used. And each tool can be used at a specific stage. And they are very basic things that we can do. So sometimes you want to look at a gender impact analysis, which I've used most of the time, because that is at the planning stage, formulation stage. That is the best tool to use. The impact analysis is to understand what is the impact. We want to evaluate the budget allocations, the type of policies that are being put in place, how this is impacting both men and women. And so GIZ some time back introduced something they call the Gender Responsive Project, GIP, where they were working with the decentralized system in Ghana. And so it was more of what do you want to do? What project do you want to put in place? How sensitive are this? And for some of the districts, people requested that they wanted markets in specific areas. And so engaging men, the men had their specific reasons for that. And then you engage women. For the women who wanted the market close to schools, they were thinking of the fact that they have kids, they had children who they would have to take care of. And so for them, if they come to the market and they leave early, it means they'll have to go and pick up their kids. But if there's a school closer, they are able to still sell at the same time, take care of their kids. And they needed lights because for them in the evening when they are just thinking about their security. For the men, when they were asked about a project about water, some men were thinking of being closer to the community park and the youth, boys within the youth. For them, they were thinking of when they go to play football, having access to water. But when girls were also asked, they wanted it very close to communities because most of them were spending more time going to fetch water and they were thinking about the distance. And so you see, in speaking to both, you realize that they are addressing specific needs. And if you have limited resources, you would want to see which one serves more the household or community. And so all of these, the impact analysis on sometimes you can have a very beautiful plan, but the resources are not available. And so you would want to prioritize. And so some of these impact analysis helps us to be able to advocate and push that this project can be implemented earlier or we can place priority on this. So that is a tool we can use at the planning stage or the formulation stage for us. So being able to analyze the impact of transport subsidies for women, considering the burden on them. And so it's a very important tool at the planning stage. Then we can also think about, in terms of the budget, where we have a little more technical skills to be able to engage with the key bodies in the Ministry of Finance. We are talking about gender budget statements. So the budget statements means that clearly, when you pick a budget, it is not vaguely mentioned that, oh, this project is a program for just women or it's blind or neutral. But there is a statement stated below it, which clearly states that there is this particular project included parts of the budget documentation outlined with allocations, the programs, anticipated gender equality outcomes that you would expect. So, for instance, if you want to take the health sector or health department, you would have them put down, include a gender budget statement on how resources are allocated to address mental health, maternal health issues, specifying targets and expected impact. So those gender statements, if it has to be done, then it means that it needs to be linked to our budget, our chart of accounts. There should be specific codes that helps you to be able to track or pull out such data. Also, for those who will be able to engage at the high level, at the Ministry of Finance level, you can also look at the tool of gender budget classification. And so for classification, usually it's about the classifying the expenditures as either directly gender targeted, or you're talking about it being supportive to gender equality, or is gender neutral. And so you see there are three things I talked about: directly gender targeted. So you would see these things clearly stated in the classification, or they are supporting gender equality. So it's statements that support that these are relevant, or they are gender neutral. And so you would want to assume that this is for everyone. So it's going to address all of this issue. And so classifying funding for women's entrepreneurial training. So just yesterday, I was working with Parliament, some of the research assistants, some of the research officers in Parliament, to help them to be able to do some basic GRB of the project they are interested in. So one of them was interested in the trade and industry sector. And so we were looking at some of the new programs. So we picked the midterm budget review for Ghana, and then we glanced into look at some of the programs or projects or interventions that were highlighted in the midterm budget. So we realized that that is not enough to be able to track or make any analysis. And so we went back to also check the PBB, the program-based budget, to see the indicator outcomes, which ones of them are directly linked to women issue. And so once you do all of that, it's easier to be able to tell that this budget is gender sensitive, or government is making progress, or you're able to advise on what can be done. And you see which ones are targeting specific women issue. One easy way is also the gender disaggregated data collection, where we mostly advocate and push that that's the basic data that we can use for analysis, is to make sure that you have your data disaggregated so that people are able to tell just from face value to say that this program targeted 100 people, 50 of them were women, 50 were men, or 40 women. And the reason was that maybe in that community have more men than women, we have more this, or the issue at hand is addressing, has to be targeted to more men. And this one can be done at all stages. So in terms of planning, implementation, even monitoring, because once you do this, it means you have indicators. And then if you have this, we are able to also push at the stage where we are talking to Ministry of Finance to say, can we have gender responsive performance indicators? Because if there's a performance indicator, it's easier for the auditor to be able to track. And I think increasingly when you review Auditor General's reports, you see that because the reports, these are plans and our budget specifically do not outline this, they are not also focused on these areas where we are interested in. But once we have the performance indicators clearly highlighting some of this, then it becomes a responsibility on everyone to make sure that this is done. And this can start from the budget cycle, measured throughout the whole stage to implementation stage. When you are using the performance indicator. One other tool is the participatory budgeting with focus on gender. So participatory is more looking at engaging and conduct consultations where you are getting the public involved. So with women groups, community representation, getting the understanding through the budget process with a focus on ensuring that women's voices and perspectives are included in the budget process. And this one is mainly at the planning stage. So formulation stage, this is a tool that can be used. That is the participatory budgeting with gender focus. Another tool is a gender sensitive expenditure tracking. So the expenditure tracking is done during the budget implementation. So whilst implementation is being done, you monitor to ensure that we are adhering to the gender related allocations. So tracking spending with health initiatives with women, ensuring that these funds are reaching the health centers. And I think one other tool is also the gender audits. So the gender audit tool is at the last stage. You see, the tracking can be done at the implementation, but the audit is when everything is done. And so, was it 4 years ago? I did an gender audit of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, MOFA, and also Fisheries. And sorry, I can't remember the full name. So MOFA, then MOFA, and it was just to understand their structures. So one of the objectives was to track the sectorial budgets to see how these are directly linked to issues of both men and women, to even understand the ministry's policies, to see whether their policies are clearly outlined such that it addresses both men and women issues. The international standard that they've signed on as a ministry or adapted, which of them are they following through? So the audit is there to see what has been done against what is being done. And some for the audit to one of the tools I used was also to understand people's perception. Because on paper it can be there, but do the people have even the capacity to appreciate what is being done? And so for some of these audits, once you do it, it means that you want to influence policy. You want to influence budgeting. And so these skills are things that we pick up to be able to engage continuously to ensure that there are changes in the budget process and ensure that citizens are also appreciating that some of their inputs are reflecting. And then government side, with the limited resources that are available, are being addressed. So increasingly, you see people will take their budgets and say they experience budget cuts. And mostly when there's a budget cut, anything that is gender is usually pushed down because the assumption is that, everything is for anyone, we are not discriminating. But though you are not discriminating, you realize that if you don't put any conscious effort, the marginalized group would never benefit from any effort that are put in. I think I've been speaking for a while now. Maybe we would want to have an interactive session. Any of the tools that I've mentioned, are there specific ones that people have used, people need clarification on, or how people intend to use them? If people have examples that they can share. I can also see there were many comments. Maybe I would just want to read through their specific ones. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to slow down. Please, is it okay?
It's your enthusiasm. That's okay. Are there any questions for Rachel? Well, the group is thinking of their questions. Go ahead. Yes, please.
Hello. This is Charles from Freetown. Thank you very much, Rachel. I was just smiling when you were giving your experience. I am the executive director for Forward Sierra Leone, and I'm also one of the technical expert team members of the non-state actors of Sierra Leone, that a civil society outfit that sits on the public financial management in Sierra Leone. We've been using most of these your templates and tools you were explaining. I had an experience where in the Sierra Leone police, the issue of gender was really not brought to the mainstream of their budgeting, especially the FSU, the Family Support Unit. Over the years, it was just subsumed in the main budget, and it's a special unit that needs to be catered for in a special way. But those things were not factored until what we introduced was pre-engagement with the leadership of the FSU to understand what their needs were and how they will all those needs be addressed and be filled in the mainstream budget of the Sierra Leone police. So once we achieved that, we had an engagement, a follow-up engagement with the executive board of the Sierra Leone police, where the IG sits. And so able to influence that leadership, that executive leadership of the Sierra Leone police to look at what being outlined for the FSU unit so it can be factored in the Sierra Leone's budget. We succeeded. It took like 2 years back and forth, engaging, training the leadership for them to understand how that can be impactful in entire budget re-engagement with the Sierra Leone police. So we started in 2016, we had the very first budget, specific budget streamline for the FAO in the Sierra Leone's budget, annual budget. And this has been our own experience, and we've been doing much on budget, tracking the budget implementation. So, for example, if we went to the budget discussions and there was an allocation meant for the prisons. And they will follow through whether these allocations indeed that were approved were allocated. So we'll now look at what was promised, what actually released, how was it expended, with those analysis, and then engage at the end of the day the Ministry of Finance. So this has been our experience within the budget formulation and implementation of Sierra Leone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please. I just want to add, I am Sise Abraman Molson from Sierra Leone. I work for the Budget Advocacy Network. I was so excited when I was listening to Rachel, making mention of, the different tools that should be used by civil society in terms of their engagement in the gender responsive budgeting. I think, as my colleague rightly said from Sierra Leone, I'm also the regional coordinator for the non-state actors who like facilitating, the national budget discussion process. But outside that, my organization, BAN, is working on gender responsive budgeting. We have been working closely with the Ministry of Finance, supporting MDAs and local councils in that direction. But honestly, the challenge we have experienced over the years, even when government has made the pronouncement that they are piloting gender budgeting at the national level with 5 MDAs, nothing has happened at the national level. But we have seen actually some efforts at the local council level, because we are working with some 7 district councils, and with support from the Irish Embassy, the Irish Aid, we have been able to build capacity around, because the issue around capacity is very challenging, in terms of the MDAs and the local councils to understand how to develop gender budgeting. They also have difficulty around getting data, which is to be used. For example, like you rightly said, you cannot plan, without having the data which will guide you. Say, for example, you want to fabricate benches for a school. You needed to have the data of the school pupils, for example, how many boys, how many girls. You want to, get a water well, for example, for a community. You need to have the information of the boys, the girls, the men, the women, how many marginalized people in the community. All of that will guide, your budget planning. And so over the years that we have been supporting these structures, we realize that they have serious challenges because governments, both at the national and the local level, there is not much investment around the M&As, especially for local council. At the national level, some effort has been done. So there is now a whole directorate on M&E, which is good, but they are still trying to put things together so that you can be able to get the data that will guide them in developing gender budgeting. From that experience, while we support them, we also do analysis to sort of gauge how far they have gone. I think with those 5 councils, when we started the analysis in 2018, they were at 2.7. The 5 councils put together. We just looked at 4 sectors. These are health, education, agriculture, and social welfare. But up to 2023, they have gone that far to be able to score an average of 29.3%, which is good, but it's also a far way to go in terms of getting the capacity and putting into practice what gender budgeting is. So in Sierra Leone, really, we have that challenge. And we believe by the concept that we have understood around gender budgeting, we think if government take that bold step with the political will and them understanding the benefit of gender responsive budgeting, definitely that will help, to fast track the aspect of developing the country and also empowering women. So I really appreciate your lecture, your experience around this. We hope that we'll continue to have short engagement even after this course, so that we'll get to learn more on how we put to practice gender responsive budgeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rachel, I just
Any
want to
other?
say very quickly, first of all, it's of course wonderful to see men demonstrating interest in GRB. It's so important because, as you've pointed out, it's not a gender responsive budgeting is not about only about women. It's about making sure that women and marginalized population groups are represented in policy making in the budget process. But it's not only, but there are important considerations when it comes to gender budgeting that there be a consideration from the male lens as well. So I'm really glad that was mentioned. I just want to say a couple of quick things, and then maybe I can get you to just make a quick wrap up statement. Or did you want to respond first to the participants and then we'll wrap up?
No, I think they shared their experiences, but I think I wanted to find out in terms of community engagement. Most of them were talking about the tools, but how have you also been able to engage community throughout the process? One of the things I would want to hear from them. Yes.
I think the work that we do in Sierra Leone is being done collectively with the community people. And to some extent, we bring the community people closer to the councils when they get a plan. For example, in the 7 districts that we work, we mostly bring the women and the marginalized groups. In some of them, we even bring school people to tell the local councils what is it that they need as their priorities to guide the planning process of the local councils. And in Sierra Leone, we have succeeded in 1 or 2 of those areas. Remember, in 1 year, in 2012 or so, we brought even the albinos in a planning meeting to engage with the Ministry of Health. And that was when government was able to approve for the procurement of a special pigmentation drug for the albinos in this country. And now every year, government is making sure a budget line is being set for that. So those are the things that we do. Because we cannot speak on their behalf as if they are not there to represent themselves. And they know their needs better. So most times we do what is called, as my brother from Forward said, we do what we call pre-budget engagement. So they collect all their needs, their ideas. They know them better. Then we link them to the ministries. For example, if it is something around women farmers, they will tell the minister, this is what we want. And we think if they do this for us, this will help us, to be able to change our situation. So that's how we do to bring the communities closer to the planning authorities.
Okay. So I just want to quickly say that.
Just a minute. Yeah, sure, just a minute, please. Just to add to what Abdurrahman submitted. In 2016, 17, 18, with the World Bank funding, the non-state actor were able to engage community people, not just before the planning of the budget. So even when the budget was launched in Parliament and approved by Parliament, we would then go back to the communities and then engage the community people at the district council halls to explain to them what allocations we are giving to that particular district in terms of the gender sensitiveness of the budget and how civil society will be able to monitor the implementation of those budget lines that were allocated to each specific district. Yeah, we did that for 3 years with the World Bank funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think another step will also be sometimes representing some of these data with infographics or the basic things that will capture or be able to have government's attention will be in terms of sometimes the percentage, because mostly we would have Ministry of Gender. And so because of the Ministry of Gender, the budget allocation to the main ministry, we would mostly think, because we have that, it's addressing issues of women. But I think one work I did with UNICEF under my previous job was looking at specific budget tracking and was looking at the budget statements to say, if you have the Ministry of Gender probably has just about 10% of the national budget, within the ministry, how much is going into compensation? You take that and you realize that it's about 50. And then a lot, for instance, for Ghana, you have a lot of the social protection programs under the ministry. And then by the time you are done with it, the main resources left to address or implement their core mandate will probably be about 5%. And then within that, you're looking at children, you're looking at women issues within that. So if we also be able to go beyond just the policies and have some of these figures pop up to say out of the 10% of budget going into this, only 3% is available to implement core mandates around issues of women, blah, blah. Then it's also, you're able to do better advocacy with that because these figures actually speak to some of the issues to look at in terms of allocations, not just all the policies and what you drill down to what is actually being used for implementation. So I just wanted to add this to it that we should also go beyond that and also use percentage share to address some of these issues. So Jeff, over to you. Unless there are other comments or questions. Or do you want me to wrap up?
Jeff, you're muted. Jeff, you're muted.
That's such a rookie mistake. Sorry about that. Thank you, Adams, for pointing that out. Yes, no, I was just saying, Rachel, unfortunately, we do need to wrap up, but I do want to say again that to encourage all participants, gender responsive budgeting, every module has a gender responsive budgeting section because it's something that is so important throughout the budget process. So this is not our first and only discussion about GRB. And Rachel, you're more than welcome to come back anytime you like over the next 6 weeks to participate in the discussion. I just would like to just emphasize the importance of the gender disaggregated data. Certainly, that's a very important aspect and component. I think we all get intimidated by terminology. Rachel's absolutely right. I remember when I learned that econometrics was just statistics for economists. So we do get intimidated by terminology, and the more we can simplify and achieve an understanding together, I think the importance. And I think last but not least, I think we're going to find in many countries that gender responsive budgeting is something that's undertaken by one person in the Ministry of Finance or an aligned ministry in the basement. Mm-hmm. It's very, very segmented. And as we look at gender responsive budgeting throughout the budget cycle, we'll see that the objective is to make sure that all budget processes have that gender lens. So Rachel, I want to thank you very much. I can see that we could have had an all-day discussion about this, but we do have to move on. But thank you so much for your time and for your input and your wisdom, and safe travels to and from Kampala.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Rachel. And of course, you're welcome to stick around if you can, but I know you have a flight to catch.
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful. Take good care. Thanks again. Adams, over to you. Adams Fushani, would you like to introduce yourself and take the helm?
Yes, I'm very pleased to associate myself with this program, the e-course. And I'm really very pleased that I have a lot of colleagues from Sierra Leone who can also enrich the discussion. But I would encourage all participants across the various countries to share and enrich the learning that we intend to embark on in the course of this 6-week program. I would begin by commenting on the two discussions, that is from Jeff and also from Rachel. I think fundamentally we are coming into a very exciting field, exciting in the sense that public financial management and therefore the budget are the only and publicly available and often misunderstood or underutilized to influence the conditions of our people. I'm using a CSO word, condition, in terms of CSOs can be very, very active, looking at the various interests they come into the policy space with. So I'm very excited that we are hearing from very passionate participants, and also I'm encouraged to know that people have come into this course with an intention to enrich whatever they are already doing. I learned from the evaluation that went out that you work on different issues. Some are into youth, others are into audits or post-audit accountability issues. Appreciate, sorry, I had a disruption on my phone, is to appreciate the interlinked nature of public finance management system and the budget cycle process. So basically, I will flag a set of questions that we will engage with more in the breakout rooms at that point. But if you don't mind, I would, as the agenda requires, talk to my particular experience from Sierra Leone. And hopefully that will inspire colleagues from Sierra Leone, but also enrich the learning and curiosity of others from the other countries. To start with, by introduction, I am a civil society, but also a technical person in terms of supporting partnerships. I'm a civil society person in the sense that I've worked across, I think, a total about 9 parliaments now, engaging different stakeholders along the value chain of the public finance system and the budget cycle. I could relate to most of what Jeff and Rachel shared with us, the various tools that Rachel shared, but also specifically the cycles around which you can be most impactful in your engagement and influence. Being that my particular interest is how, as parliaments, our parliaments, we are able to inform and support parliaments, influence what the executive can deliver based upon what is planned and what resources have been mobilized for, is to stress that budgets are values driven. Budgets are not neutral. And therefore, I will recount here one experience from Sierra Leone during a particular session in Parliament where CSOs, and you can all bear with me from the CSO reps that we have heard here, that Sierra Leone is very vibrant when it comes to CSO activity. One particular CSO person asked a question, and the question was to hear from me what my take is about the fact that CSOs in Sierra Leone are very partisan, and sometimes it comes through in their comments and their engagement. And my response was in the form of a question. Do CSO members and CSOs go to the market? Do CSOs pay taxes? Are they citizens? And the response to all those questions were yes. I said, therefore, let's not look about whether someone is talking politics or not, but whether he is talking policies to influence the outcome of the budget. That is to draw our attention to the fact that as CSO actors from across our countries, we have a mandate. Our mandate is to shape government policy, is to shape government revenue mobilization, is to shape the execution, and to shape how government and all agencies in the cycle account for their stewardship. And therefore, talking to my stewardship in Sierra Leone, since 2021, I have been in Sierra Leone supporting the parliament in its work, but importantly, trying to see how Parliament can come through its challenges from the 2018 elections and recently the 2023 elections. So first and foremost, the Parliament of Sierra Leone achieved a lot in terms of drawing a broad strategy plan, which is now midstream. It's a five-year plan, it's now midstream, trying to be more responsive to citizens. A key pillar of that plan is to make Parliament more responsive. And being responsive means is to reflect the needs of the society, which talks to what CSOs most ardently want to hear and want to see happen. How our representatives reflect our needs in their debates and approval of the budget. And not only that, how they follow to hold the executive accountable. So to this extent, Parliament went again through our support and collaboration with other partners of Parliament to propose and finally got established what we call a Parliament CSO network, also called PACISONet. And I'm happy to hear one of the presenters or comments from BAN, the Budget Advocacy Network. I've engaged extensively with your boss at some point, especially one of the open Parliament days, how the budget interests CSOs can coalesce around the cluster that is in the PACISONet plan to engage and influence the budget cycle process in Sierra Leone. And I'm being frontal here, being direct here. The experience of Sierra Leone is not different from what I observed in Ghana. I worked with Ghana Parliament for 9 years. They are very close in terms of Parliament being denied, quote unquote, denied the opportunity to interrogate the budget well before it approves it. In Sierra Leone, the budget window is just October to December. As we are speaking now, I believe there's a lot of pressure on Parliament and all the Minister of Finance to make sure that the Parliament comes through and approved before Parliament goes on recess for end of year. So my experience from Sierra Leone is that, and you see that in some of the questions I've posed, you might miss the opportunity to impact the budget cycle process and the outcomes of the budget if you don't position yourself at the right place. Similarly, Ghana is noted for last-minute approval of very important legislations, and the budget is in particular legislation. Once Parliament approves it, it's a law. And it's often the case also that the budget is rushed through here within 2 weeks. Talking to my experience in Sierra Leone again, and I'm limiting it to the areas where this conversation will be most meaningful. How CSOs can engage and impact on the budget cycle, but also the public financial management system in general. If we have observed what pertains in Sierra Leone, my colleagues would bear me out on this. Parliament is scrambled when it's time for the budget. And I have advocated forcefully that the next phase of partner support is to hold Parliament accountable on how it takes the budget cycle seriously. I say seriously because, and bear me, I'm wearing my CSO hat here. That's what I said. If I were talking from the EU point, my language would be different. I'm a CSO for a moment. If Parliament were to take their space seriously, Parliament will demand the executive give them enough time. But be that as is may, because everything is based upon what the PFM system and the Constitution says it should be at the moment. It used to start sometime in July, but now been brought to October there. What it means, therefore, is as a CSO person, at what point do you want to engage to better influence what comes to Parliament? This is very important. Is it the policy setting stage? Is it the point where there is a fiscal statement presented to Parliament? Which particular stage are you positioned well to make meaningful impact? This is very, very important. It's important in the sense that if you wait till the last moment, the politics of budget will run over you. And you can understand what I mean by the policies of the budget. Contrary to our experience in West Africa, the East Africa Group have managed to demystify what budget is. They have come to appreciate that when budgets are overly looked at from the political lens and publicized as such, it affects the market, it affects prices, and in some cases it can be instant. So they have removed the fanfare that comes with the budget process. Jeff and others who have worked in East Africa will bear with me that, for example, Kenya and Uganda, they have enough time for the budget. And it's not even ceremoniously presented like we do in Ghana and Sierra Leone, where the Minister of Finance is coming is a whole party business. So that is to say that depending upon the context, you need to identify when and how to engage the process. Parliament of Sierra Leone, and my experience again, is in relation to the accountability part of the budget process, the tail end. It is my experience that there isn't a lot of accountability of Parliament itself, and that is because CSOs haven't taken the opportunity. Parliament is not well resourced, but if CSOs are ready and available to support the oversight function of Parliament, we can have better budget outcomes. Information can be paused, can be limited for Parliament. CSOs in the water sector, CSOs in the education sector, those like Budget Advocacy Network that are looking at the numbers. If you help Parliament with data, Parliament can better engage the executive. Other than that, when the executive comes, they are able to dominate the conversation because they have information. But I should mention that, thankfully, in line with our efforts, and I would highly commend the leadership of Parliament of Sierra Leone in this case, they passed at the last minute a Parliament Act 2023, which has established the Parliamentary Budget Office as a specialized unit. And that is expected in the long run. At the moment, they don't have enough capacity. They have a director, but if I compare their resources to those of Uganda and Kenya, they are far away from where they can really impact the scrutiny and analysis of Parliament before their budget is approved. But that's a good start to have it recognized as a specialized unit that should impact in the budget process. I would encourage BAN and others to engage to reinforce the need for data-driven decisions in our Parliament. Without information, politicians, the representatives are able to do what they know best. Nay and yea, which doesn't necessarily solve our problems, but that is what they are elected to do, to support one stance or the other. But when they are supported with information, they are able to do a better job for us. And recently, just before I came, I had a training with the Legislative Committee, and I asked a question to the chair and the members. I got the understanding that from that question, I asked them, what do you understand by legislative footprint? We reflected together on what it means, what footprint stands for. And I told them that is what you will bequeath to generations yet to come by your presence in the current Parliament. And when we went on with the conversation, it came to light that 46% or more of laws passed in the Parliament are done but not implemented. So, as CSO persons, we don't have to forget our responsibility of following the money. In this case, the budget. If it is passed, identify a particular area that you have capacity, track it, follow it to the logical end, from the policy setting to the audit stage. Other than that, the budget, just like any law, may be being passed but not be implemented to the letter. Jeff, keep me on track if I'm going beyond time.
I think you're doing wonderfully, but you might want to move to the breakout groups just because of the
Okay.
time. But you're
Thank you very much. Yes,
listening to you with
indeed.
keen interest.
I have shared on the chat section of this platform some questions for us to reflect on in our groups. The first one is, if we have listened closely or carefully to the discussion from Jeff, we will appreciate that the Public Financial Management Framework or system has phases. And it will be important in our reflection for us to keep that in mind and then ask ourselves if we're interested, especially those that are listening and very interested in the gender responsive budgeting part, at the policy formulation stage of the PS system or at the budget system, what is it that you can do? So if you are interested in the gender budget responsive budgeting, you will realize that, as I mentioned earlier, the budget is value driven. The one preparing the project or the one presenting the budget to Parliament has a different understanding of what the needs are. So your engagement as an individual, as a CSO person, or as a community have a lot to shape what comes to Parliament. I don't need to influence which part of the cycle you position yourself. You will need to assess yourself how adequate you are prepared in terms of resources, in terms of time, to better influence what is being brought, or if it's now in Parliament, how we get it out at the as a bill in the Appropriation Bill Act when it comes out, where your Parliament is able to make some changes.
For those of you who have been on the line today, please encourage your colleagues to join us next week. We have a much larger group taking the e-course than those who attended the workshop, the live session today. So we want to make sure that we get you on the session. Last but not least, please provide feedback. Feedback. This is a learning experience for us as well. It is the first time that we have run this e-course, and we want your feedback. So not only in the poll, but if you have other views on how we can improve the e-course and the live sessions, please let us know. Ben, is there anything else you wanted to say before we conclude?
Not really to add anything, but just to also say that this has been a very great learning and sharing experience for all of us, and we are looking forward to the rest of the weeks that we have for the rest of the models. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
For
Ben.
me too, it's been a very exciting engagement. I'm happy that we've been able to pull this together.
And don't forget, Module 2 is next. Please complete it before the live session, because we'll be talking about the formulation phase. That is what Module 2 is about. So everything that we've talked about today, all your excitement about being involved in budget planning, that's what Module 2 was about. So we'll see you at the module. Take care.